بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to the Fiqh class. Today inshallah we will discuss Zakat al-Fitr. After we finished the discussion of the book of Zakah, we have Zakat al-Fitr as a separate chapter. Why? Because it is related to fasting. Although it is a duty, but that duty is related to another ibadah. It is not related to the money. Unlike what we have in Zakat al-Mal, the Zakat of the money. It is based on how much you have, how much you accumulate, how much you save. Here it is based on you individually. As long as you are able to afford it, you will pay the Zakah. So in this chapter, in Zakat al-Fitr, we will discuss the ruling of it. We'll talk about who should pay it and the amount of payment that should be paid and how it is paid, what type of money that is paid, when it should be paid, and the recipients. These are the issues of Zakat al-Fitr. So we will start with the first issue, the ruling. What's the ruling of Zakat al-Fitr?
Sunnah.
It is Sunnah. So if you don't pay Zakat al-Fitr, you are not blameworthy.
Yes.
Sunnah muakkada, it's the same thing, right?
You used to. It's not obligation, but if you don't pay it, you will be held responsible.
If you are held responsible, that's not Sunnah. Is it Sunnah or wajib or what?
Sunnah. Two opinions. There's two opinions. There are two opinions.
What's your opinion? I'm not asking you what are the different opinions. I'm asking you what is the ruling on it.
Sunnah. No, it's fard.
Fard? Why it is fard?
Didn't the Prophet say that
Sorry.
it is an obligation on every male?
I don't know. Did he say that?
I thought
That was before Zakat.
What?
Zakat al-Mal sort of Zakat al-Mal.
Zakat al-Mal overtook and Zakat al-Fitr.
It was before it was an obligation.
Before it was an obligation.
But because of the Zakat
In Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, فرض رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم زكاة الفطر. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم mandated, obligated, زكاة الفطر. صاعا من تمر أو صاعا من شعير. One صاع of tamr or one صاع of شعير. صاعا من بر أو صاعا من شعير. One صاع of bur or one صاع of شعير. This is where? In Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Ibn Umar. What does it mean?
It's obligatory.
It's obligatory, right? And how come Mateen says it is not obligatory?
That was before Zakat.
That was before Zakah. Did Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu say Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mandated Zakat al-Fitr and then it became Sunnah? Or
It depends if we take the opinion of the companion as a recommendation or as an obligation.
he did not give his opinion. He said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mandated. So
The companion saying that the Prophet depends if we take it as a recommendation or an obligation.
again, do you get it? What Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu is saying? Ibn Umar is not giving his opinion. He's not giving his understanding. He's saying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mandated. He's only relating to you what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did.
There's another evidence though.
What evidence?
There's a Bedouin came, Prophet
Bedouin came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
and then he said, "Is there anything else?" Prophet said, "No, this is."
Okay, very good. What do you say about this? The Bedouin came and asked the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what are the obligatories? What are the mandatory things? 5 prayers. Is there any other prayer? The Prophet ﷺ said, no, unless you want to volunteer, to do optional prayer. What is the zakah of the money? The Prophet ﷺ told him, is there any other duty other than the 2.5? The Prophet ﷺ told him, no, except if you want to give in charity. What does that mean? Is it obligatory or not?
And it's not obligatory.
In that hadith, did they discuss the amount of zakat, or it just said pay zakat?
Pay zakah.
And it didn't say how much.
He didn't say how much,
So
no.
this is part of zakat.
This is part of the zakah. That's why this is the opinion of the majority. Opinion of the majority says it is still obligatory. And this hadith does not contradict it. Because zakah of the fitr, the zakat al-fitr is included in zakat al-mal. It is still zakah, so it is still mandatory. This is the opinion of the majority. Another opinion says it is recommended. Very few scholars said that. The overwhelming majority of scholars said it is mandatory. We have a third opinion says it is neither obligatory nor sunnah. It is abrogated by zakatul mal. They rely on hadith narrated by Qais ibn Sa'd ibn Ubadah radiyallahu anhu, that zakatul fitr was mandated before zakatul mal. But this hadith includes a narrator who is majhul. So the hadith is not authentic. So how many opinions do we have? 3. But what's the opinion of the vast majority of scholars? It is obligatory. Okay. If we say it is obligatory, according to the majority of scholars, obligatory on who? Who should pay it? How it becomes obligatory? It is obligatory because you have lots of money? Who should pay zakatul fitr?
Maybe you should have the nisab.
What nisab? Again, we said in zakatul fitr, it is related to the individuals. It is not related to the money. It is not based on how much you have, how much you saved. It is based on you. If you are there, then scholars agreed that it is mandatory upon every Muslim, male or female, young or adult, even the slave, free or slave. It is obligatory upon every single Muslim. So if it's obligatory upon everyone, then who receives it? It is obligatory on everyone who has addition to his provision for the day. That is zakatul fitr. So in zakatul fitr, it is not like zakatul mal. We have people who pay the zakah, and people who receive the zakah, and people who don't pay nor receive the zakah. There are 3 types there. Here we have 2 types only. Either you pay zakatul fitr or you receive it. There is no third choice. Either you are a recipient of zakatul fitr, which means you are very, very poor, or you are payer for zakatul fitr. While in zakatul mal, we have people who pay zakatul mal. We have people who receive zakatul mal, and we have people, they neither pay zakatul mal or receive zakatul mal. That's not the case here. Here it is mandatory upon every Muslim, every individual, male or female, young or adult, free or slave. But in case of children, who pays the zakah?
Parents,
The father.
The father. What if they have money?
they can pay themselves.
They pay. They pay it. Same thing with the slave. There is difference of opinions. Does he pay it or his master pays on his behalf? What about the wife? If the wife is rich, who pays the zakah? The majority of scholars, including Imam Shafi and Imam Malik rahimahumullah, still the husband who is responsible for the household, he pays the zakah. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says, if she is rich, she pays the zakah. He doesn't pay the zakah for her. Okay? So it is mandatory upon everyone. Now, we know zakah is mandatory. We know that every Muslim who has extra addition to his provision for the day, he has to pay the zakah. How much he pays? $10? $20? 2.5% of what he has? What should he pay? One bur. One sa' of bur. What is bur?
One saw of dates or one saw of barley?
Dates or grains. What kind of grains?
Barley.
Lentils? Beans? How much we pay? One sa'. One sa' of what?
Whatever ISTH does.
What is the sa' again?
Size 2 mud.
The sa' is 2 mud. Rais says 4 mud. Is it 4 or 2? What is the mud? It is the handful. This is the mud. So the sa' is what? How many times? Like that? 2 times. Who agrees? 3. MashaAllah, we have tried to reconcile between falsehood and good. It is 4. 4. This is 1 time, another time, another time, and another time of the average person. It is approximately in our time, 5 pounds. Approximately 5 pounds of what? Of barley, of dates. This is the zakah. فرض رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم زكاة الفطر صاعا من بر أو صاعا من شعير. Wheat, barley, dates. It is 1 sa'. There is a disagreement though on the wheat, because some scholars said it is more expensive, so half sa' is enough. And there was a narration according to it, and that's why Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says from dates or barley it is 1 sa', but from wheat it is half sa'. But the majority of scholars said no, it is 1 sa' of everything. And actually it varies. Sometimes, even for one kind, like the dates, how much is 1 pound of dates? $5. You could get a pound of dates for less than $1. It depends. There are dates, each one is like this, very big. And there are dates, each one is like this. And some dates are very expensive. Some are. So what do? You take the average. The average and you pay it. Now if you say 1 sa' or 1 pound is $5, multiply this by 5, what you will get? $25. But if it's $1, you multiply it by 5, how much is it? 5. Same thing. What about rice? Can you pay it with from rice? Yes. Scholars said when the Prophet ﷺ listed food, general, what the kind of food that people need. So rice, again, how much is the pound of rice? The average. Multiply this by 5.
But you can also pay the food as well instead of cash. You can actually pay the food. You can give the
You
rice.
can actually pay the food. Of course. There is no disagreement about that. But what if you pay cash? That's the question. Can you pay cash? What did the Prophet ﷺ say? Or what Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma said? The Prophet ﷺ mandated zakat al-fitr. Of what? 1 sa'. Did the Prophet ﷺ say, or Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma say, or the equivalent? Did he say that? Did Ibn Umar say, or the equivalent of it from money? Can you pay money? Nowadays people ask, how much is the zakat al-fitr? And every year you have different announcement or different amount from different places. One time it is $5, one time it is $7, one time it is $8. Can you pay cash? According to the majority of scholars, no. You don't pay cash. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ specified, he said 1 sa'. 1 sa'. He did not say you pay the value of 1 sa'. So he specified, you pay what? 1 sa'. What if you paid cash? The majority say no. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says yes, it is permissible. As long as you pay the value, it is permissible. Imagine now you have a poor who received 5 pounds of rice and another 5 pounds of rice and another 5 pounds of rice. 15 pounds of rice. He doesn't want that. He wants money. He wants to be happy. Now what's the purpose? Why we pay Zakatul Fitr? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that it is purification for our fasting. It is means of happiness for the poor. So no one would be in need on that day. And actually when you look at it, if you pay only food, you will guarantee that no one will take it but the poor. The one who is really, really in need. If people came to you and told you, here is 5 pounds, you say, what do I want with it? If you are in need, you will really take it because you want anything, you want to eat. So in this day, everyone should be sufficed. No one should ask. It is the day of Eid. Everyone should be happy. So we have two opinions. Opinion of the majority that it has to be paid only food. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says you pay money. It is their choice. Because it is the poor who chooses. Maybe he doesn't want to eat with that money. He wants something else. He wants new clothes on the day of Eid. So is it a specified ibadah that you have no option? Or it is the right of the poor that you give him and he takes the decision, he makes the call, whatever he wants. That's the difference. Now, another important issue is when it is due. When do you have to pay? Before the prayer, but when it becomes mandatory. Because before the prayer, that's the deadline for it.
After Ramadan.
At the end of Ramadan. They agreed that it is at the end of Ramadan. But they differed on whether it becomes mandatory by the sunset of the last day of Ramadan or by the dawn of the day of Eid. They disagreed on that. Why they disagreed? Because is it related to the fasting or it is related to the day of Eid? Is there any difference? They say yes, there is. Because if a woman was pregnant and she delivered the baby at 3 a.m. on the day of Eid, before dawn, and after the sunset, does she pay on him, for him, Zakatul Fitr? Because you have to pay Zakatul Fitr on him, as long as he's born. If you say Zakatul Fitr becomes mandatory by the sunset, this baby was not born at that time when it became mandatory, so you don't pay Zakatul Fitr on his behalf. If you say it becomes mandatory by the dawn he was born, so you pay Zakatul Fitr. You see?
Yes.
So even this accurate issue was discussed by scholars, rahimahumullah. Now, we know this is the time when it is due. This is the time when it should be paid. And the deadline is before the Eid prayer. But when are you allowed to pay it? That's the question now. How soon can you pay it? How early can you pay Zakatul Fitr? How early can you pay Zakatul Fitr?
As early as possible, just after.
As early as possible. So next Ramadan, inshallah, we will have fasting. So I want to pay now, as early as possible. Can I pay now for the next Ramadan? What does it mean, as early as possible?
In the month of Ramadan.
During the month of Ramadan.
During the month of Ramadan. So you can pay it on the first day of Ramadan?
Yes.
That's not according to the majority. Last 10 days. Some scholars said, Imam Shafi rahimahullah says, this ibadah is related to Ramadan, to fasting, so you could pay it as early as the first day of Ramadan. Other scholars say you cannot pay it before the 15th of Ramadan. According to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah and other scholars, you could pay it earlier, 1 or 2 days, not more than that. So there is difference of opinions. You don't wait until the dawn, until the day of Eid, unless you know the poor individually. So you go directly and you pay it for him. Because some people nowadays think that as long as they paid it before the Eid prayer, it is accepted, but they put it in the box. And it won't reach the poor until maybe 5 or 6 days. And that's wrong. That's why you should pay it earlier. Unless you know the poor. At the time of the Messenger ﷺ, there were no organization, no middleman. It was paid directly to the poor. So you could delay it until the Eid prayer. But now, don't wait. People are coming to the Eid prayer and they put the zakah in the box. Don't do that. You have to pay it when you know that it reached the poor. Because that's the purpose of the zakah. To make them happy on that day, to suffice them, not to let them ask or beg on the day of Eid.
Even if you put on first day, there is no guarantee now, right? But it will reach. Even if you put it in the box on the first day of Ramadan, there's really no guarantee.
No, if you put it on the first day of Ramadan and you don't know, I mean, that's serious problem. What do you do then? You pay it 2 years ahead of time? Who are the recipients of Zakatul Fitr?
Poor.
Hmm?
Poor people.
Poor people. We already mentioned the one that does not have enough provision for his day. He needs. That's the one who receives Zakatul Fitr. But that's not really the issue here, because we already mentioned that. When you know who pays it, you know who receives it. In Zakatul Fitr, as I said, there are only 2 options. Either you pay or you receive. Unlike Zakatul Mal. You may pay and you may receive, and you may not be neither payer nor receiver. But here, either you pay or you receive. So if you know who pays, you know who will receive. Scholars differed on the people of the book. Can you pay Zakatul Fitr to a Christian or a Jew? Can you pay Zakatul Mal to...
Maybe.
Can you pay Zakatul Mal to the non-Muslims?
Only for one category.
Just for one category.
For one category, which is مؤلف قلوبهم. What other than that? What if a poor Christian? Do you pay him zakah of money?
Unless he's from that tribe. Unless he's from that one tribe which is not there anymore. There's one Christian tribe which you can pay.
Can you pay zakah to non-Muslims?
Yes, of course. Why not?
Of course, why not?
Poor is poor.
Poor is poor.
The non-Muslim, no, you cannot.
Hmm?
Zakatul mal, you cannot.
Why you cannot? Poor is poor.
Yeah, travelers and travelers.
Traveler is traveler. What do you think?
One time, in Umar, there was this politician who was supposed to be
Yeah. Did he give him zakat al-mal or he gave him from Baytul Mal? There is a difference, a huge difference. Okay, that's why you need to study. And when you study, study thoroughly, please. Because in the hadith of the Messenger ﷺ, when Mu'adh radiallahu anh was sent to Yemen, and this hadith, how many times we have repeated it, yet still we don't have full understanding for it. The Prophet ﷺ told him, after they say La ilaha illallah, after they pray, tell them that Allah mandated zakah taken from the rich and paid back to their poor, not to the poor, their poor. What does that mean? تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ, it's taken from the rich Muslims and it is paid back to the poor Muslims. If you don't pay zakah, you're not worthy of receiving the zakah. So if you're not a Muslim, you don't pay the zakah. And at the same time, if you're poor, you don't receive the zakah. The zakah is taken from the rich and paid back to the poor. It is cycled from the rich Muslim to the poor Muslim. That's the opinion of all scholars. 4 Imams, they agreed on that. But they differed on zakat al-fitr. Does it have the same ruling or not? Some scholars said no. The majority said yes, it has the same ruling. It is paid to the Muslims only. Okay? A common question that is asked several times: can you pay the zakah in a different place? You live here in the States and you want to pay the zakah in Middle East, Asia. Can you do that? Or you cannot?
Yes, you can, but it's better to pay to those who in your own.
What?
It can be done, but it is better.
You can do it.
Yes, better to do
It is better to do it
it in your way you live.
where you live. Yes, you can pay it because there are no restrictions. There is no condition that it has to be paid wherever you are. And there are evidences from the companions and the successors that sometimes they sent the money, the zakat, to other places. So it could be done. This is what is related to zakat al-fitr. And after that we have the book of siyam, the book of fasting. Some scholars add zakat al-fitr to the siyam because it happens at the end of it. Some scholars put it after zakah of the money, before siyam, because it is related to zakah. This is zakah and this is zakah. But as I told you, they are different. Zakatul mal, it is related to money. If you don't have the money, you don't pay the zakah. Here, it is related to individuals, people. Whoever is there, zakah has to be paid on his behalf. So that's the difference. And we will start with the book of Siyam inshallah next session. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وعلى صحبه أجمعين.